Hi, my name is Carly, and today we're going to be doing the Interactive Advanced Concept Presentation 6. Today we are going to be making a pasta rocket. So we are going to start off with our materials, and then we will talk about the process behind what is going on. So for this experiment, we are going to be taking hydrogen peroxide. I have two mason jars because one is going to be with our yeast and the other one is going to be without, which will be our control. And then I just have a beaker of water because our pasta is going to ignite, so I want to be able to put it out. We have two pasta noodles, and then we have our yeast and a lighter. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to fill one of these jars with hydrogen peroxide and with yeast. We are going to place our noodle on top, and there's a little hole here, and our noodle is going to be acting as our combustion chamber. So our yeast will react with the hydrogen peroxide, which is H2O2, and the yeast acts as a catalyst, and it is going to help produce water and oxygen gas. So it actually takes away one of the oxygen molecules from the hydrogen peroxide, which is our H2O2. It's going to mix in the jar, and then the pressure of the jar, the oxygen gas is going to go up through our hole and through our noodle, and we are going to light it. And we'll talk a little bit about why one noodle that doesn't have the mason jar that contains the yeast does not light as efficiently as the one that does. So just for reference, I drew out a equation here. So we have H2O2, which is our hydrogen peroxide. We have our yeast, which is our catalyst, because it's going to be breaking down the H2O2. It's going to take one of those oxygen molecules away, and then we'll be left with water and oxygen gas. So let's get started. So I will put hydrogen peroxide into both of these, and then I will just put yeast into one. This is a little bit bigger of a mason jar, so I'll add a little bit more hydrogen peroxide. So I'm going to wait to add the yeast to one of them because we're going to do our control first. And I have my beaker of water so that we can be ready if we need to put out the flame. Okay, so have my lid with the hole. And we want to hold this on here. We don't want to use this lid because it is going to hold the pressure in there, and it can cause it to explode. So have our pasta noodle here. And we are going to light. So I think that this will take longer to light actually on fire because the yeast is what is taking away that oxygen molecule from the hydrogen peroxide to form oxygen gas. And just with this, we only have the hydrogen peroxide in here, so there isn't any oxygen gas that is being formed. Now the oxygen gas acts as a oxidizing agent, so although it's kind of smoking, although it doesn't actually combust on its own, it will help other combustible materials light faster, which would be our noodle. So there's a little bit of a flame there, but it goes out pretty quickly, so just gonna throw that in there. Okay, so that was our control. As you can see, that the pasta just kind of started to burn. It didn't light on fire as easily, so I predict that with our next experiment, whenever we add the yeast in, because that yeast is going to take the oxygen molecule away from the H2O2 hydrogen peroxide, that we're going to be forming that oxygen gas that, like I said, isn't necessarily combustible, but it acts as an oxidizing agent, which will help the noodle light on fire a little bit faster. So we'll do that next. Let me just get these. And I'm just going to put a little bit in here. I can hear it's already starting to fizz, but we want to mix this around so that it starts to mix with the hydrogen peroxide, and then we're going to start to see that oxygen gas forming. So as you can see, it's starting to bubble up. And I have our noodle, which is our combustion chamber, and we will light this. We want to hold this on here. And it's immediately starting to light a lot quicker than the last one. Oop. Now this is like related to how they set rockets off. It's a similar sort of reaction. Now, obviously they're not using hydrogen peroxide in noodles, but the fuel source and then the oxygen gas will help oxidize whatever fuel that they use to help with the combustion of this. There we go. This is actually a really cool experiment how this works. Oop. There we go. All right. All right. So we'll just briefly go back over what we talked about. So whenever the yeast combines with the hydrogen peroxide, it acts as a catalyst, which will take one of the oxygen molecules away from the H2O2, turns that into oxygen gas, which is not combustible, but is acting as an oxidizing agent to help combustible materials light. In this sense, our combustible material was our noodle. We saw with our first experiment with the control that did not contain the yeast that the pasta just kind of burned. It eventually lit on fire, but not as easy or readily as the noodle that was placed over the mason jar that contained the yeast. The oxygen gas bubbled up through the mason jar, went through our combustion chamber, which was our noodle, and actually caused the noodle to light on fire much easily. So thank you for watching. This was our interactive advanced concept presentation 6.